Two. How's it going, everyone? I'm Afaria. Welcome to Heliopolis Radio. Today, I've been fortunate to be joined by Mark Ryall. He's a self-published author. He's also a retired economics teacher, and he's a world triathlon championship athlete as well. Mark, thank you so much for coming on. And without further ado, tell us about yourself and what is it that you're currently doing?
Okay, well, thanks, Mafaro, for inviting me to your podcast. It's a pleasure and an honor. What am I doing right now? I'm retired, so I'm in a phase of my life where I have a lot more time to do non-work related things. As you said, I did teach for a long time, and but I retired just before COVID hit, and I didn't plan it that way, but that's the way it happened. And since then, I've been doing things that you've mentioned already, which is triathlons and writing books. Yes.
And obviously, I know this is a bit unrelated to your books, but I guess, I was inclined to ask. You're a master of many trades, and I just wanted to ask, what is it like being a triathlete? What does it entail, and what kind of brought you to that space?
Yeah, well, I always liked to run. I ran in high school, and then I got injured when I was early. A lot of runners will get injured when they go a little crazy with the sport. So
Mm.
when I was 21, I was running marathons, and then I got injured. This is way back in the 1980s, so I'm sort of dating myself here. And but then I stopped because of the issues with injuries, and I continue with my teaching and whatnot. But when I was about 45 years old, I got back into it. And it's actually my daughter, Stephanie, who drew me back in. And that's sort of the topic of one of my books is the idea of her wanting to run. And she was only 8 or 9 years old when she had this inner desire to run. And I had to sort of go with her to join her for some of the workouts because we were in the big city. And so that got me back in. So I started as a runner, and then when I was about 55, one of my friends at school, a great guy named Chris Zielinski, he's the assistant athletic director, he was into triathlons, and he said to me, Mark, why don't we try a triathlon together? And I said, Chris, only two problems with that. I can't bike and I can't swim. So he said, oh, well, you can learn how to bike. That's easy. You know, every kid used to ride bikes. So no problem. I'll help you get a nice bike. And then the swimming, that was the bigger issue. It's still an issue with me. I'm still learning how to swim properly. I was a terrible swimmer. Now I'm getting a little bit better with that. So anyway, I immersed myself in triathlons, and he's pretty competitive. He had done a couple of the world triathlons. You have to qualify for that. And then finally, I did qualify in 2017 for the world ones in Rotterdam and Netherlands. And then I also qualified for two since then, one in Switzerland and one in Spain. And I'm also going next year to
Wow.
near Africa, Malaga, Spain. I would like to travel to Africa actually as part of that. Um, so it's been a great journey, and that's how I got into triathloning at my age. I'm now 64 years old.
Incredible stuff. I am quite ashamed, just the achievements you've had and doing it so late, obviously, because of injuries and everything. It's really inspiring. And I guess I just wanted to ask, just in terms of the mindset, what does it take? And I guess this mindset carries out into many facets of life. So I was just going to ask, what type of mindset does it take to try to represent your country on a global stage against other people? What type of mindset do you need to get the preparation going? Like you mentioned, swimming was a difficult thing to kind of get in and complete. So I just wanted to maybe get a bit of insight into that, if possible.
Sure. I think the mindset is you got to be open-minded. You got to be definitely have to be willing to learn. So, for example, the swimming, I had no idea how to swim. It seems so simple, but it's very technical. So you got to be open to learning, and you've got to be able to suffer a bit too. A lot of the training, I remember Lance Armstrong, the famous cyclist, always said for his biking, you've got to be able to suffer a lot in not just in your training but in the races. So suffering can be good as long as as long as you don't kill yourself. And On top of that, you got to be pretty committed or pretty devoted. You got to want to do it. It's not for everybody because there's a lot of time commitment and competitive pressure.
Mhm.
But I think the fourth one, I think that which sort of surprised me, is you got to be willing to talk to people, meet people, get to know people, train with people, and so it's a whole other subculture you got to let yourself into, um, which that's been a nice surprising one for me, that side of it too. So
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And obviously, you've written two books. So I just want to ask about the first one, Age Decoded. Um, why is age reversal the central theme around genetic engineering in this book? I know when you talk about genetic engineering, it could be many different things. It could be,
yes,
physical enhancement. It could be mental, cognitive, and actually that's kind of a main thing these days. Nootropics and all sorts of things, and trying to see how we
yeah,
can hack the body and everything. So I just wanted to ask, why age reversal? Why you made that the central.
right. Well, it comes back to triathloning again. I remember having a conversation with a group of the world triathlon athletes after our event, and one guy, I was in the um, 55 to 59 category. So the nice thing about they have age groups, and that's why I can compete at my age. You're in your
Mm,
5 year age bracket. So he was 59 and I was 56 during the race. And he said to me, I can't remember the fellow's name, but it really struck me. He said, "Mark, you have a huge advantage over me. You're only 56. I'm 59." And I thought, oh, come on, can you really feel the 3 years difference, right? And actually, I started doing a bit of research into aging and athletic performance, and I did find that there is a significant, it's about a 0.5 to 1%, let's say even a 0.5% per year drop off in your aerobic capacity, which is really important for triathlon, right? So over the
mhm,
3 years, it could be like I might have a 2% advantage over him, right?
mhm,
Which doesn't seem like too much, but in a 2.5 hour race, 150-minute race, that's a 3 minute advantage.
mhm,
So that actually is pretty significant. And so I started researching it, and I came across a fair amount of content about different anti-aging things and whatnot. But genetic engineering did pop up, and we can talk about some of the research later if you want. But just the idea of trying to make humans live longer by tinkering or editing or changing their genetic code was fascinating to me. The idea of trying to even make anybody age longer, not necessarily immortality where you can live forever, but extending aging significantly. I found it interesting as an athlete. And then I thought, well, what about society? Like, forget about me in
mm,
triathlon. What about our world? What would it be like if we did this for all humans? And that really blew my mind. I thought there's only one way to do this, write science fiction on this, because it is science fiction. Nobody knows what's going to happen. First of all, they don't know exactly what's going to happen with genetic engineering. We have you can make some forecasts, and that's what I do in the book. But it's got to be science fiction for me because I'm not even a geneticist, right? So I
mhm,
have to be able to speculate. But even a full-fledged geneticist, an expert in the field, if they're forecasting 50 to 100 years out, it's going to be science fiction, even for them. So, and you mentioned there's psychological and physical. In my book, Age Decoded,
mm,
I chose one physical thing that's this anti-aging application, and then I did chose the psychological one. So and it's in my book it's called the propensity to dissent, which is sort of like the human capacity for being
mm,
critical of what's going on around you. Like we need people who are critical and who question things that are happening around them, whether it's with governments or business or even in their own lives. So in my book, both are changed. You can imagine you can imagine if there's some tinkering with the propensity to dissent, how that would
mm,
affect things in the world, but also with aging. Making in my book, they make them immortal, and also they discover how to reverse aging, so older people can start aging backwards. And there's people working on this right now, and at Harvard and MIT and other places. Um, so it could happen. So
Wow. No, that actually, well, actually leading into the second question, because you had to do the research, I'm sure you have developed a tremendous amount of insight into what we're actually doing in regards to this field. And so I was going to ask, what are your thoughts on the current level and development of genetic engineering today? And there was also another add-on to that is you mentioned that the government actually misused the work of a character within the book. Do you believe that this is kind of prevalent in today's society where the honest sincerity of scientists' work, they do things from the sincerity of their heart, for the betterment of humanity? Do you personally believe, not being a conspiracy theorist or anything like that, do you personally believe that
yeah,
governments do take advantage of individuals like this who develop things of significant contribution to humanity?
yeah. So you're back. You're now to the central. That's the central question of most science fiction novels that involve technology. And my novel is speculative fiction, which means it's hard science fiction, which means I'm actually trying to project the future. Like I'm seriously
Hmm.
trying to look out there. I'm not on some other planet somewhere with weird aliens and all that. I'm actually trying to. Here's humans. Here's what I think we
Yeah.
might be doing in 50 to 100 years. So yeah, the current research is pretty powerful. It's still a little speculative. For example, George Church at Harvard University, he's experimenting with dogs and whatnot, and he's trying to do reverse aging. And he thinks that by 2030, which is not far off, we will be able to stop and reverse aging. He's pretty
Wow.
confident. But he's just one. There's David Sinclair. David Sinclair is pretty popular. He's done a lot of YouTube videos and whatnot. Um, and he's also at Harvard. He's from Australia, I believe, but he's researching through Harvard. He's similar to Church. He's pretty optimistic that, well, he already claims he's done some reversal, and
That
he
is,
doesn't actually, and he's talking about not even necessarily changing the DNA code, but just changing the way your body interprets your DNA, called methylization and whatnot. So him and Church are just two examples. Um, there's um, there's a plethora of research around this. Of course, you imagine the interest of humans in this, even if they can slow down aging or making,
mm,
but the idea of even reversing aging and making you younger with what you have, is pretty fascinating. So, as for the psychological and other stuff, genetic engineering is booming. It's a tsunami. There was a Nobel Prize just awarded for it a couple years ago to and there's a book on this called by Walter Isaacson, who does a lot of the famous biographies. He did Einstein's biography and many others. He wrote a biography on Jennifer Doudna and Emmanuel Charpentier. They shared the prize. Those two ladies shared the prize for their research on CRISPR engineering, which is one of the main techniques
mm,
for editing genes,
mm,
editing them in various ways for like could be psychological things like trying to cure depression, schizophrenia, but a lot of it is more, I would call it physiological enhancement, such as trying to cure rare diseases or even things like cystic fibrosis.
mm,
Um, the, um, the genetic coding for a lot of these diseases, they have pretty good ideas now. So with this CRISPR technology, the capacity is to go in there and actually edit, change people's genetic makeup and cure them or at least help them. And that's just treatment. Then there's enhancement. Like I can imagine, I would actually predict right now that in probably 10 or 20 years, there will be genetic manipulation for sports, which
mm,
is sort of sad. It's sad. Like doping has been very difficult to control. The World Anti-Doping Agency just actually now has a policy already. They're bracing themselves already for genetic engineering, how to prevent that for athletes from using that to become faster, stronger,
mm.
whatever. I could see that happening fairly soon too. So I don't know if that answers your question, but there's a
Um,
lot happening And
It does, and it's very uncomfortable. I must say, especially particularly with the reverse aging, with the two guys at Harvard. I'm actually going to look into that.
yep,
That is very scary. Because obviously, I think, and I believe your book explores this, is you just think about the implications and how, again, who will be able to access this and who it's restricted to, and it's usually a case of how you enforce it upon other people. We see it all the time, particularly now. I mean, we also have the technocracy also doing it, putting implants and stuff in people to, and the typical human notion of doing something as a guise for something else, which is usually more
yeah,
sinister. We have an unfortunate
yes.
tendency towards that as a society currently.
We
So,
do. And that's, I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's a part of your question I did not answer. I'm sorry. I knew there was another half to it. The idea that how is all this applied? How might it be applied in the sinister aspects? And without being conspiracy theorists, you don't have to
mm,
be conspiracy theorists to realize what's happened on the, for example, the nuclear front, right? The great applications in nuclear technology. Here in Ontario, we have something like 60% of our power is by nuclear, and we have hydro. So we're a very green province in terms of generating electricity. One of the top jurisdictions in the world. We use very little, no coal, and very little fossil fuels. It's all nuclear and hydro, basically, almost. So, in the nuclear front, there have been issues. There continue to be issues, and that's just one technology. Artificial intelligence.
mm.
That's going to be fun to watch. See how.
Oh, it's going to be difficult to handle
That's
no, the
a,
implications, just even for job security, even for myself, and the younger
yeah,
generations, where do we fall in line, and what happens to us? A lot of blue collar, white collar jobs are simply on the way out. So, again, and now you're mentioning it, if you have genetic engineering affecting athletes and how they perform, what's natural, what's not natural, how do we define, it's just quite a lot of fundamental existential questions actually that you ask yourself.
yes,
What's the purpose behind things if, this is the level of influence that we have on the natural order of things, which I still firmly
yeah,
believe is still the
yeah.
overruling authority. I don't know.
Yeah, so in my book, I really explore that. It's very philosophical and it's pretty heavy actually. So I get into things like what is natural selection
Mhm.
versus unnatural selection, and what are the philosophical and psychological effects of even having a person live or think they're going can live for forever. Like, how would
Mhm.
that affect you, your value of time
Mhm.
and space and your ambitions? And in my book, they have something that kicks in called um, it's a type of apathy that really um, that it imposes itself upon people because the uh, they know they can live for a few thousand years unless they get run over by a car or something. So they their whole attitude changes. Like I would argue that I probably wouldn't have written the book at the age of around 60 years old. Wouldn't have written it if I knew I could live another 2-3 thousand years. What's the
Mhm.
rush, right? So
Yeah.
um, so and then all of the um, there are even some religious underpinnings. Like, are we then becoming like
Mhm.
godlike in the superhuman or transhuman? So we think we can design humans who are transhuman, almost godlike themselves.
Mhm.
Um, so what are we worshiping, right? What is
Mhm.
the so I do bring in some C.S. Lewis and other famous like Teilhard de Chardin and some of the religious philosophers too, because it is like you said, it's an existential. I love the way you use that word, existential question. It is a fundamental question. Like by genetic engineering, you are literally for the first time in the history of humans, you are changing humans. Like you're changing them what not you're not fashioning them or educating them or giving them healthcare. You're actually fundamentally changing their very human nature, their code, their God-given code.
Hmm.
So that's very serious business, right? And the
Hmm.
implications are just immense, immense.
Wow. No, definitely heavy stuff. I mean, yes, it's science fiction, but you know what, in today's world, it's more of a foreboding kind of truth. It's just kind of the way it's going about. But to switch it up, to take off the heaviness of of such a theme, your second book, Run Daughter, Run Father. I have to ask, how difficult was it writing about a personal experience, right? Because fiction, it's more a projection of your mind. It's a philosophy. It's not, it's relevant to you, but it's
Yeah.
not personal to you as such. So I guess I just wanted to ask how the writing process was different for this book.
Yeah, so it was a lot different, and it's like you said, it's nonfiction. It's more a little bit biographical, though I really meant it as a training manual for
Mm.
runners and triathletes, especially for age group runners, like younger runners like my daughter, and then older runners like me. So people who are not necessarily, 20 years old and professionals, but people across the age spectrum. So it's very different because I had experienced all of it, and I didn't have to do fundamental research or anything. I knew what I wanted to say. But I did have to do some, uh, I guess, collaboration with my daughter, who's a character in the book. And I had to get permission from her. Say, do you mind if I write a book about some of the running you've done with me, how you motivated me to get into it, and some of the things you've accomplished and how you did them and as a younger athlete. So we had to collaborate. I had to do some research there. Like I would ask Stephanie, well, what happened? What was your first race? Do you remember, when you were 9 years old or at school in grade three, what happened, or how did you get into that? Or what, how were your feelings when you had asthma,
Mm.
when you were reacting with asthma? How did you handle that? And you're growing out of that now, so it's not an issue, but it was a big issue when you're in grade nine. These things, this book was very different. I really enjoyed writing it. Well, I enjoyed the first book too, but this one was more of a personal mission and meant to be a training manual with lots of stories attached to it, involving my daughters and my competitive running. Yeah, but it was different. Although one thing similar, it's still publishing a book, and it did help that I had done the first book because there's self-published books, right? So I had
Mm.
gone through the self-publishing process already, so I was pretty sure I could do it, and I knew the mechanics of publishing through that self-publishing mechanism for the second book. I was
Yeah, so
ready
the
to do
machine
that.
was already kind of established for you to make it more efficient. And so
Yeah,
what
yeah,
was, if I could ask, what was the journey like, I guess, being so involved in your daughter's athletic development? Because the relationship from what I've seen, at least in my family, there are not many athletes, but my younger brother is an athlete. And usually as a parent, again, you kind of come to you know, you have your separate journey, how you did it, how and sometimes it kind of gets blurred, who's running whose race type thing. I don't know if that
yeah,
kind of becomes and I know from a parent's perspective, from what I've come to see, you obviously do things because you firstly know you have a rough idea of what it takes to compete at a high level, and secondly, you want the very best, obviously, for your daughter. So I'm just wondering, how was that journey kind of evolving from just from father to coach to father to mix it, how you
yeah,
got the middle line between it, like when you're like, okay, I'm being
yeah,
too much of a coach, I'm not being enough of a father figure. So I just wanted to ask if you don't mind sharing. Obviously, it's a more personal question, but I do
yeah.
believe that there's something people
Well,
could learn for that.
yeah, so Mafaro, you hit the nail on the head there when you talked about the different roles. So you got these hats on. You got the coaching hat, you have the parenting hat, and then you're even sort of a cheerleader hat or whatever. So I'm a father, I'm a coach. I also trained with Stephanie. At least I was able to keep up to her until a few years ago. Now I don't even bother because she's way faster than I. So I could get on a bike. That's my only hope now. Hop on a bike, try to keep up with her because like she's doing 330 per kilometer, 430 per kilometer. I'm not doing that anymore. I can't even that's just not happening. So but anyway, you got all these hats on, and like for example, right now as we're talking, she's lining up in 20 minutes. She's going to run in Boston for the
Wow.
Boston Marathon, but
Wow.
not the Boston Marathon. She's not running the marathon. That's tomorrow. She's running the 5K precursor run, which still has 10,000 people. She's all
Yes.
excited. I'm excited because she's running. You start cheering her on. But I
Yeah.
don't coach. I don't coach her much anymore. I do still advise her a bit, but so the coaching sort of came off when she hit later high school. She had a couple of
Mm.
really good high school coaches. Then university, she ran. She had great coaches. So she didn't need me. But I coached her a lot when she was 10, 11, 12, and 13. That's a very important part of it because
Mm.
there's some issues there where you have to be very careful not to push them too hard, not to get
Mm.
them injured, not to burn them out. And especially young females, there are some issues pre-puberty where if they're too thin or pounding their legs too much on the pavement, they can run into some long-term
Injuries.
issues. So,
Wow.
and I talk about that in the book. Like that's very important, but also the parent trap, like you mentioned. Okay, is their race your race, or is
Mm.
it their race? Like, are they running for you, or like?
Mm.
Well, and that's actually why I called it "Run Daughter, Run Father" because she started running first. Then I got into it. She's actually I didn't talk her into running. She sort of drew me into running, and that's actually pretty important because you don't want to be imposing your own athletic ambitions on your kid and
Mm.
living vicariously with their success. And
Mm.
that's called the parent trap. In the book, I talk about the parent trap, where the kid's success is really that's seen as the parent's success, and that's what really drives the parents, and then the parent drives the kid further. So it's sort of a cycle, and you got to be very cautious of that. So I do
Mm.
have a pretty good discussion about that. And actually, Steph in the introduction to my book, she writes the prelude to the book, and
Wow.
she says in there that we locked horns a number of times, where and the primary issue was I always was trying to get her to slow down, train less, and race less, and she always wanted to do more. So if we had any uh, controversy, especially when she was 13, 14, 15, I'd say she was starting to get invites to races in the United States and stuff like that.
Mm.
And I just tried to temper it a little because you got to be so careful. So there's a lot of hats on. There's some friction, but overall, it was a wonderful experience. And like I say near the end of the book, every father parent wants to share things with their uh, sons and daughters.
Mm.
And Stephanie and I found a wonderful way of sharing so many things through the sport of running. So it's very positive message overall, no doubt about it.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. It really is good to know that people can actually find a book which provides insight. It's a very big thing this side. How many parents, and you see it here at the sporting events, they'll be talking as if they're there. They're not. It's a whole lot of there's a whole lot of stuff that goes into it. So thank you so much for sharing. And obviously, for time's sakes, I did want to ask, how can people access your content? Obviously, I'm based in South Africa. I know there you have, I forgot the book, but you have Barnes and Noble, you have Indigo Books. They're a whole different, but we don't have that here, unfortunately. We have our own kind of set structure. But is there a way to access maybe the book digitally? Are there any e-copies available? I don't know, in case
Yeah,
someone on this side may be interested in actually picking it up.
yeah, I think there. It's probably available on Amazon. Would be one of the Amazon and Apple would be
Mm.
probably available across the world. So I assume there. And so there's a digital ebook available, and then there's also a hard copy of each now available. Self-publishing is getting better with the hard copies too, so that's great because the paperback. It's not, sorry, I didn't say hard copy, I meant paperback. So you got a paperback ebook. If they go to Amazon, they type in the running book is called Run Daughter, Run Father. or they type in this sci-fi book called Age Decoded. There's a hyphen there, Age hyphen Decoded, on Amazon or Apple. You'll see those will pop up. You'll see a little picture of me and then maybe some biographical information of the author, me, and then you'll see a summary of the book, and then the price points of the book. They're pretty reasonable price points. I think the ebooks are something like $9.99 US, or actually $7.99 US, $9.99 Canadian. I don't know about your currency, but some equivalent thing like that. The paperbacks are a little more expensive. But anyway, so they're available, and that's the nice thing about self-publishing is you can piggyback on these main platforms once you have everything set up through your self-publisher. And it's been a great journey seeing that and making that available. I'm really just trying to share information in the world to the people in the world about important things, and so it's been fun getting feedback from readers and sharing what I have to say, what I think is important with people out there across the world. It's fantastic, and the self-publishing thing has been another wonderful experience. Never thought I'd ever even write a book, Mark Ryall. If you'd asked me 10 years ago, what? An author? No, I teach economics. I don't do that stuff. Right? I can't write, whatever. Which is a message I'd give to your listeners. You just never know, right? There could be something harboring within you that, maybe you're working full time. It may not come out yet, but don't ever pigeonhole yourself. You never know what might lie in store for you. It could be some artistic thing, like it doesn't have to be writing. It could be anything. Music, it could be theater, it could be painting, or anything a little different, maybe that you don't necessarily know is inside you, but if you give it a chance, it could come out when you have a little bit of a different time, or it doesn't have to be when you're retired, but it could be a hobby that you start working on. And so that part of the journey has been fantastic too, just trying something different and giving it a go. And then doing podcasts like these have been, thanks for having me, because I would have never thought I'd be presenting in front of a podcast audience or doing about a book that I wrote, because I never thought I'd write a book. So these, I don't know, just sort of, it's been great. But like I say to people, just you never know what you can, what might happen. It's going to take some energy and some commitment, but you just never know. Like you doing this podcast, that's a great undertaking. Trying to learn from people and share it with others, but that's a great mission, great mission.
Mark, I think you have taken some of that CRISPR technology, had like a sixth sense. You actually answered the last question I was going to ask. What are your words of wisdom and advice for the audience listening in today? And you basically just went straight into it. But no, I truly appreciate the words of encouragement. And again, wishing you all the best. There was one more question. Are you working on another book, actually, by any chance?
I am actually, and it's going very slowly. I don't know why. It's been tough, but I want to publish a book on artificial intelligence, because we've talked and the impact on human thinking and freedom. So that's going to be a tough one. But I'm reading as much as I can about psychology, neurophysiology, and then all of the things going on the AI front with mind reading and mind tapping into people's thoughts and minds. They can already read people's minds with not going inside them, like from external
measuring electromagnetic impulses and what those signals are associated, like the behavior patterns those signals are associated with. I did read some serious stuff about that, and that was I don't know if you've read the book 1984.
Yes,
George
indeed.
Orwell.
Yeah. Great
I
book.
recently, oh no, terrible. I hate every minute. It was a well written book, but I just, the story was just, yeah, it was,
It's so pertinent today, that book,
oh,
and it
oh,
could be written 2084. It wouldn't matter the date. Eh? It's just
oh, uh,
George Orwell, and his discussion about the use of language at the end, and the
mm.
it just freaks
And
me
then
out.
and
So
then and how it plays with your psyche and how you can get people to behave. It's such a reflection of the situation we live in today. I really didn't enjoy
yes,
the book, but it was well written.
yeah, it was really well written, and
Uh,
so it's an inspiration, that book. So anyway, that's the topic of my next book, but it's probably going to take me 1 or 2 years to get this one together.
yes,
I've written 10 pages on it. So I have two narrators. One is the AI supercomputer
yeah,
that's beyond, and then the other one is this scientist who's involved in a program that they want to use to read people's minds to for as a counterterrorism. That's the that's the starting. We need to read people's minds, everybody's minds, because we have to protect ourselves from bioterrorism. And that sounds good. That's a good
sure.
reason. But then it gets way out of hand. So you can imagine. So I don't know. It's I hope I get this done. It's going to be a tough one, but
No,
yeah,
your writing style and your insight, even just the storyline for Age Decoded, it's good. It's good. And so again, once I get a cash, I want to get a copy myself and read it. I just really am tied down with work, podcasting, so it's always difficult when you interview authors because you have all these good stories that you want to read. It's just, when you're reading a book, I'm the type of person that just goes all in. It's like a whole weird process. I can't describe it. It's like a you get lost in the author's psyche. So I will let you know once I find my schedule sorted out, and I'll definitely give it a read. And I'll put the link in the bio and in the description and the video for those of you tuning in so you can access it. Please do read it. And
sure.
again, wishing you all the best moving forward as the books continue to garner more recognition. And as you reach more people through podcasting, I think it's really, really good that you're utilizing this avenue. And I think it'll do well for you. I hope nothing but the best. And so
Yeah.
yeah,
Thanks so much. Those are great questions, and I enjoyed the conversation with Farrell. And thanks to your listeners for tuning in. Thank
thanks
you.
so much, Mark. It was really good. It was really good.